You know, in New York, we have more details now about that shooting inside of a building on Park Avenue in Midtown.
Well, investigators found a note on the shooter's body revealing grievances against the NFL. This is a photo obtained by our Fox station in New York. Shane Tamura talks about CTE, which is a brain disease stemming from repeated hits to the head and linked to the NFL. Mayor Eric Adams says the gunman was actually trying to target NFL headquarters but took the wrong elevator. Tamura shot and killed 4 people before killing himself. Police say he had a documented mental health history. Authorities are now searching his home in Las Vegas to piece together a timeline.
Welcome back, everybody. We have a live look for you right now in Hawaii as a lot of people keeping a close eye on what's happening there with waves after an earthquake near Russia sparked global tsunami concerns. We've been closely watching what's going on. Those warnings were issued from multiple places around the world, including right there in Hawaii that you're looking at, Alaska, the west coast of the U.S., as well as Japan. It all comes after an 8.8 magnitude earthquake hit Russia. The warnings for U.S. stats have been downgraded to advisories. There it states that you're looking at video as people evacuated to higher ground around the Pacific. In Hawaii, that massive traffic jam in Honolulu as people are desperately trying to get away from the coast. 6-foot waves were also reported in Maui. All flights to and from the airport have been canceled there. Hours ago, the evacuation order was lifted, so things are looking up. And in many areas that they feared would be so bad, they only got about 2-foot waves, but still a dramatic situation going on earlier.
Okay, let's take you to our nation's capital, where a 3-day NTSB hearing begins today to comb through the details of that deadly mid-air collision near Reagan National Airport there in Washington, D.C. This was back in January between a Black Hawk helicopter and an American Airlines plane that left 67 people dead. The hearing will examine the chopper's data systems, the airspace and helicopter routes, as well as air traffic control procedures and training. Findings aim to determine the probable cause and lead to safety recommendations.
Interest rates, will they get higher? Will they get lower? Will they stay the same? We'll find out today.
Yeah, the Federal Reserve is expected to wrap up its meeting today and keep interest rates unchanged despite enormous pressure coming from the White House. So Doug Luzader joins us live this morning from Washington. Doug, Trump says that because the U.S. economy is doing well, the Fed should cut rates, but Fed officials and nearly all economists see it the other way.
Well, you know, I think some in the Fed might argue that because the economy is doing relatively well, they're going to be reluctant to lower interest rates. So they are widely expected to keep rates unchanged today. The fear they have is that if they lower rates, that will certainly give kind of a juice to the economy, but it can also cause prices to go up at a time where there's just a lot of uncertainty about where inflation really stands. There are some signs that inflation is very slowly beginning to tick up. We don't know ultimately what the impact of all of these threatened tariffs and actual tariffs are going to have on consumer prices. So this is something that the Fed is watching very closely. I think people that watch the Fed expect them to possibly cut rates, but probably if that happens, it will be later this year.
Well, I know one of the dangers is they don't want to overstimulate the economy if it is strong, but this is a really big week for the economy because we're getting the jobs report, the GDP report, consumer confidence, the tariffs are set to start on Friday. So there are a lot of pieces of the puzzle this week that could give us a clear picture of how strong or not strong the economy is doing this week.
Well, the Federal Reserve is expected to take this wait-and-see approach because they're concerned about where specifically inflation is headed. They are tasked with not just tracking inflation, but also the employment markets. Right now, a lot of signs about the economy look good, but they are concerned about the impact that a rate cut could have on consumer prices.
All right, again, Doug Luzader live from Washington. Thanks for staying on top of this.
They're putting them around schools. They're putting them in our poorest neighborhoods. And now they're putting them in every gas station.
Okay, that was Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. talking about 7-0.
Yeah, it looks like a harmless herbal stimulant sold in smoke shops, but federal health officials warn it is actually a dangerous opioid. Now they're sounding the alarm before it becomes a bigger crisis.
It's nicknamed legal morphine, and now the Food and Drug Administration wants the DEA, America's drug enforcement agency, to block a supplement known as Kratom 7-OH.
7-OH binds to the mu receptor, which means scientifically, by definition, it is an opioid.
Kratom comes from a plant and in its natural state is about as strong as a light beer. But when concentrated into the 7-OH compound byproduct, experts say it's much more potent and ripe for abuse. Health officials say products with Kratom 7-OH are already easy to find, available in many smoke shops and even gas stations, and often marketed as a pain reliever and mood booster.
Ice cream cones. Here's one drink with 7-OH in it.
They're gummy bears. They're bright colors. They're candy flavored.
Over the years, vendors of Kratom say the product works and that the dangers are overstated.
Pain relief or getting off of opiate addiction. Even, have customers that have used it to move away from antidepressants.
Others say it's not worth the risk. John Harden says his wife took Kratom while recovering from surgery and blames it for her death.
She actually might have thought it was an alternative to get off of that other stuff.
That's why they're going after companies selling it, saying it's important to get out ahead of a problem to prevent a new wave of the opioid epidemic.
We need to be proactive so we don't get caught blindsided again.
And it's not just the federal government cracking down. At least 24 states are now regulating the sale of Kratom.
Well, the Trump administration is looking to roll back a scientific finding which has formed the foundation of U.S. efforts to fight climate change.
Now, the EPA says the administration is planning to revoke a 2009 declaration which found that carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases endanger public health and welfare. Lifting the finding could end emissions regulations on automobiles and other industries.
A bill introduced in the Senate could mean Americans get a cut of the revenue from President Trump's tariffs. The measure was introduced by Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley. Now, it would give families up to $600 per person. The bill follows the Treasury Department's announcement that the president's tariffs have actually brought in $28 billion in revenue for the federal government through July. So the president has previously floated the idea of possibly giving Americans rebate checks.
And some household items are going to cost you more soon. Procter & Gamble says it plans to raise prices on around a quarter of its products. The company says the price hike is meant to offset the cost of new tariffs. The price increases are expected to take effect in August. No word yet on which specific products will be impacted.
JCPenney selling nearly 120 of its stores to a private equity firm, including 6 right here in the Houston area. So the deal is about 5 years after JCPenney filed for bankruptcy. The money will go to paying down the company's debt. The sold off stores, though, are still going to be open. Officials from around the world say that in the Middle East, Gaza is on the verge of famine.
Well, dozens of hunger-related deaths have been reported, and aid groups say it's only going to get worse without access to food and medicine. Now, this week, President Trump gave strong indications the U.S. will deepen its involvement, but administration officials say the president is still working closely with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Well, the UK planning to recognize a Palestinian state next month if Israel does not agree to a ceasefire. On Tuesday, the UK's Prime Minister Starmer says that Israel must commit to long-term peace and let the UN in to bring in humanitarian aid across the Gaza Strip. Now, also, France announced this week that it plans to recognize a Palestinian state next month as well at the UN General Assembly. More than 140 countries, did you know, already do recognize a Palestinian state. The United States does not.
Well, on Capitol Hill, the U.S. Senate appoints President Trump's former lawyer, Emile Beauvais, as a federal appeals court judge. Beauvais was granted a lifetime appointment in a 50-49 vote in spite of whistleblower complaints during his time at the Justice Department. He'll serve on the 3rd U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, which impacts cases in Delaware, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania. Beauvais is best known for being part of President Trump's defense team during his New York hush money trial.
All right, so this Texas headline has gone national, and now we have more information on that murder trial in North Texas, as a judge has now issued a gag order in the case of Carmelo Anthony.
Yeah, the track star is accused of stabbing a fellow athlete to death at a track meet in Frisco back in April. Peyton Yeager with our sister station in Dallas has more.
In a newly obtained gag order, Collin County Judge John Roach cites extensive pretrial publicity as a serious risk to its fairness. The trial for Carmelo Anthony set for June 1st next year. Anthony charged with first-degree murder. Police say Anthony stabbed Austin Metcalf during a dispute at a Frisco track meet in April. Anthony previously claimed self-defense to officers on scene. Tuesday, we spoke to Russell Wilson, an attorney not associated with this case.
And it tries to preserve the party's right to have a fair trial and for all the evidence to come out in the trial of the case.
This gag order now bars attorneys, witnesses, law enforcement officers, courthouse staff, and spokespersons involved in this case from talking about the case publicly. The organization Next Generation Action Network has previously spoken on behalf of the Anthony family. Tuesday, Next Gen released a statement acknowledging the judicial gag order, writing in part, "We remain focused on our advocacy mission, ensuring that Carmelo Anthony's rights are upheld." The gag order also extends to family members. Both families have also made prior public statements since the stabbing.
In the past, there's been kind of competing statements released by both sides, and so I don't think it's necessarily a surprise to see that. One of the things that potential jurors are asked is, have they seen media coverage of a case and whether or not that impacts how they view the case.
A key question the court will have to vet before trial next summer, which will be in Collin County. In the gag order, the judge also stated that changing the venue would be inadequate, as the case has garnered attention nationwide. Meanwhile, in this pretrial phase, today was the deadline for Frisco ISD to hand over personal information of the high school witnesses who were at the track meet. Usually, student information is federally protected, but the district received a lawful subpoena last week, which takes precedence. The same Collin County judge who issued the gag order also recently issued a protective order of this personal information. Information like students' date of birth and addresses will now be private in a secure court file.
Lawmakers are back in Austin, and they're taking on a controversial issue that could impact who represents you in Washington.
Yeah, Fox 26's Jade Fleury joins us here at the desk in studio with what's behind this fight over redrawing Texas's political maps. And Jade, obviously now we're hearing Democrats may walk out.
That's true, and you guys, this is just all about redistricting, basically changing the lines that decide which congressional district you live in. And Republican leaders say that Texas needs to fix some of those congressional districts that may violate the Voting Rights Act. But Democrats say that this isn't about fairness, it's about Republicans trying to add more seats to Congress. And now there's some talk that Democrats may walk out to stop a vote. If Democratic lawmakers break quorum, they could face a $500 daily fine, but the Texas Tribune is reporting that some wealthy donors are stepping in, offering to pay those fines and cover costs. But some argue that the redrawing of these maps are being done behind closed doors and that minority communities could lose their voting power. And for the last 3 days, lawmakers have been hearing from the public about this topic, most people speaking out against the redistricting efforts.
From Friday to today, maybe it's a handful or maybe a little bit more than a handful that said they support the process of redistricting in mid-decade.
This isn't about fair maps, and in fact, it never has been in the state of Texas. It's about desperation and power grabs to rig an election, to carve up communities of interest, and to protect the powers that be.
So 2 more hearings are still scheduled, but with no maps on the table yet and tensions rising, many expect the redistricting battle to end up in court or stall in the legislature altogether. So you guys, it's just something we're going to kind of have to keep a lookout on.
We sure will, Jade. Thank you.
Farmers and distillers say the inconsistent trade negotiations is just complicating the planning and production process.
So on Sunday, President Trump announced a 15% tariff on most imports from the European Union instead of the 30% he threatened earlier this year. Unclear, though, how this agreement will impact things like alcohol, for example. American distillers hope it's a step toward eliminating all tariffs in the spirits industry.
A terrible word, but it's a little bit boneheaded. They've lost $500 million in revenue. This industry should be immune to that. Why? Because we bring people together.
First Minister of Scotland, John Swinney, is urging President Trump to leave Scotch whiskey off any tariff list, and he is hoping to make some progress on that before Trump returns to the UK in September.
YouTube is adding a new age estimation feature to protect its teenage users. YouTube says it plans to use artificial intelligence-powered technology to help identify users under the age of 18 to give them an age-appropriate experience on its platform. The new tool is trained to determine a user's age based on various factors, including the types of videos they watch and search for, regardless of the birthday attached to their account. If the technology guesses wrong, they will have the option to verify their age, such as using a government ID or credit card.
743, Apple may be close to a deal with the new bank to back the Apple Card. That's according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. The Apple Card is currently backed by Goldman Sachs. According to the report, Apple began talks in 2023 with JP Morgan Chase to replace Goldman as its partner on the Apple Card. Reuters is reporting that both Barclays and Synchrony Bank have also spoken with Apple about becoming the company's credit card partner.